好，各位现场的嘉宾，我们以热情掌声来欢迎我们劳动。
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome to the floor our Deputy Director General Lin Hongde of
Mr. Michael Guggen, along with Deputy Representative Dai. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We shall begin our workshop in just a minute. We will be broadcasting live online as well. Thank you so much. We are also providing simultaneous interpretation service for you. If you switch to channel 1, that's listening to Mandarin. If you switch to channel 3, that's for English. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin in about 7 seconds, 6 and counting, for a live cast of our post-pandemic talent and skills mobility workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you on-site and online, and welcome to our post-pandemic talent and skills mobility workshop. Right now, we're enjoying a wonderful cooperation between Taiwan and Australia, and so today it's a training result mutual recognition between Taiwan and Australia. So ladies and gentlemen, to begin our workshop today, as the MC, I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce all of our VIP guests. When introduced, please look at the camera and smile and wave your hand. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin with our host. Please welcome Workforce Development Agency Deputy Director General, Mr. Lin Hongde 副处长。掌声欢迎副处长好。Our host, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcoming our guests of honor from the Australian office in Taipei, Deputy Representative Mr. Michael Guggen. Welcome. G'day, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Also our guest of honor, also from Australian office Taipei, also Deputy Representative, Madame Helen Dai. Please welcome with our applause. Thank you so much for joining us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming our guests. Please welcome from Yunlin Jiayi Tainan Regional Branch of WDA, Carpentry Trainer, Mr. Zhou Qingtian, with our applause. Please wave your hand. Thank you for joining us. Also from Yunlin Jiayi Tainan Regional Branch of WDA, Carpentry Competency Expert, Mr. Li Tuxing, joining us. Thank you for joining us. Please wave your hand. Thank you so much. Also from the Australian office in Taipei, we have with us Senior Business Development Manager, Jane Liu. Please wave your hand and smile at the camera. Wonderful smile. Thank you. I can see your smile through your face mask. Yes. And also welcoming from Australian office Taipei, Education Manager, Cherry Hu, with our applause. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the Planning Division of WDA Director, Mr. Hou Songyan, Hou Zuzang. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcoming from Chinese Management Association, our Secretary General, Mr. Zhang Yushan, Misuzhang. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, our on-site guests includes from the Planning Division of WDA Section Chief, Mr. Huang Zheshang, Huang Kezhang. Please wave your hand. Thank you so much. These are our on-site guests, and now welcoming our online guests. Please welcome, joining us online from Kirana Colleges Australia, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Tony Patterson. Tony, there you go. Thank you so much for waving your hand and smiling at us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, from William Angliss Institute, Director of International and Business Development, Mr. Wayne Crosby, joining us online. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Thank you for joining us. And we also have on our screen, this is from Taiwan WTO and RTA Center, Zhonghua Institute for Economic Research, Senior Deputy Executive Director, Mr. Dr. Li Chun. Li Chun will be joining us later. This is his still photo, Okay, thank you so much for our guests joining us. And now, as the MC, Andy, I still have to introduce more. These are not individuals, these are organizations welcoming. The organizations, the following are Planning Division of WA, Training and Development Division of WDA, Competency Standards and Skills Evaluation Division of WDA, Taipei Keelung Ilan Hualien Kinmen Matsu branch of WDA. Well, you know, WDA is Workforce Development Agency. Moving on, also introducing the organization of Taoyuan Hsinchu Miaoli Regional Branch of WDA. Taichung Changhua Nantou Regional Branch of WDA is also joining us today online, on site as well. Yunlin Jiayi Tainan Regional Branch of WDA. Kaohsiung Pingtung Penghu Taidong Regional Branch of WDA. Well, by now you should know all the cities in Taiwan. And also introducing Skills Evaluation Center of WDA, and of course, last but not least, National Development Council. Ladies and gentlemen, our applause to all of us joining us here today. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, with our applause as well, please welcome for the welcoming remarks, our host, Deputy Director General, Mr. Lin Hongde, 副署长.
Mr. Michael Gugan, Deputy Representative of Australian Office in Taipei, Ms. Helen Dai, Deputy Representative of Australian Office in Taipei, Mr. Wayne Crosby, Director for International and Business Development of William Angliss Institute Australia, and Mr. Tony Patterson, CEO of Kurana Colleges Australia, and Dr. Li Chun, Senior Deputy Executive Director of the Taiwan WTO and RTA Center. And because our professor is currently otherwise engaged, he will be joining us later on. Distinguished guests and colleagues, good morning. On behalf of Workforce Development Agency, Ministry of Labour, I would like to sincerely welcome your participation in Post-Pandemic Talent and Skills Mobility Workshop. As we recall the history of cooperation between WDA and Australian Office, it began in 2011 when both sides signed the MOU on vocational education and training cooperation for the first time. The MOU was renewed again in October 2020. During that period of time, we not only shared a close relationship of frequent exchanges, but have also jointly promoted many projects successfully and achieved satisfactory outcome. Here today, the organizing of the workshop has marked the continued development of cross-cutting, cross-project, and cross-forum model in the post-pandemic era, and to continue upgrading the exchange and cooperation between training institutions of both sides. By building a platform of exchange, intra-training results, mutual recognition, we hope to enhance human resources development and progress continuously. In the past, Taiwan and Australia have successfully launched 2018 APEC Event Coordinator Pilot Program and 2019 Event Competency Digital Upskilling Program. Senior trainers were recommended by TAFE Directors Australia to deliver lectures for the programs, and participants were awarded with 7-in-1 certificates endorsed by Taiwan, Australia, and international organizations. The achievement is not only a breakthrough for Taiwan's vocational training outcome, but also increased our confidence in the internationalization process of training courses. Australia is a key partner in our new southbound policy, and a solid basis of cooperation has been created between both sides for many years. In the past 2 years, comparative studies on trainers and competency-based courses were promoted by Taiwan and Australia, which have laid a good foundation for mutual recognition of training course units between both sides. The event today aims to commence a joint effort on vocational training and competency standards in order to facilitate talent and skills mobility in the post-pandemic era. It will also provide a better opportunity for the two countries to respond to the challenges of pandemic, digital development, talent mobility, trade connection, and supply chain restructuring. Last but not the least, I would like to once again express my appreciation to all participants and experts for attending this event. Looking into the future, I believe that we will continue deepening Taiwan's relationship and friendship with Australia and jointly work for the regional prosperity. My best wishes to the success of this workshop. Thank you very much for your participation.
Our Deputy Director General, Mr. Lin Hongde, 副署长. Mr. Lin, our Deputy Director General, is Taiwan's #1 expert, top expert for workforce development. Ladies and gentlemen, also for the welcoming remarks, I would now like to welcome our guest of honor, Deputy Representative from the Australian office in Taipei, Your Excellency, Mr. Michael Guggen. Please.
Thank you very much. First off, let me acknowledge Workforce Development Agency Deputy Director General Lin Fushizhang. Thank you for having me here today. I want to acknowledge all the distinguished panelists that are participating in today's event. Thank you also, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's post-pandemic talent and skills mobility workshop on mutual recognition of training results. In March of this year, I was very pleased to come to this very room to witness the renewal of the MOU on vocational education and training cooperation between TAFE Directors Australia and Taiwan's Workforce Development Agency. And I'm very pleased to be here today to see the MOU being put into action through today's workshop. Australia and Taiwan are long-standing education partners. Prior to the pandemic, we were proud to have seen approximately 18,000 Taiwanese students enrolled annually in Australian education institutions. Over 250,000 visas have been issued to young Taiwanese under our popular Working Holiday Maker scheme. And over 1,000 Australian students have studied in Taiwan under the Australian government's New Colombo Plan, gaining skills and building lifelong friendships and understanding. And as the Deputy Director General just mentioned, this is of course also complemented by Taiwan's new southbound policy, which promotes Taiwan's relationship with Australia as well as other countries in the region. Australia is also very much looking forward to welcoming back fully vaccinated international students to Australia from 15 December of this year. Coinciding with this announcement, we have recently launched the Australian Strategy for International Education 2021 to 2030. This strategy responds to the challenges of COVID-19 and charts a path to sustainable growth for Australia's international education sector. In particular, it recognises the increasing popularity of high-quality online study. This international strategy contains several items directly relevant to the topics under discussion today. For example, the Australian government commits to growing and diversifying Australia's overseas and online education options. The government also commits to addressing barriers that limit the recognition of Australian qualifications overseas. And of course, vocational education and training remains a key pillar of Australia's education system. Our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has emphasised the importance of a world-class skills and training system that is designed to better match employer needs and job seeker skills. We are reforming our training system to consult industry on the better design of our training. This will ensure that the skills of workers meets the needs of industry. And this vocational skills training is an important part of the education relationship between Australia and Taiwan. We continue to strengthen our links in VET by cooperating with several Taiwanese institutions that are using Australian curricula, by expanding English language teaching, by expanding English language teaching and teacher training cooperation, including through interactive online programs, and by promoting the circulation and talent, the circulation of talent and professional skills between our two economies. The discussion here today, which will focus on mutual recognition of training results, is an important step to further deepening the connections between Taiwan and Australia. I wish you a very successful workshop. 谢谢.
谢谢. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to our Deputy Representative from Australian Office Taipei, Mr. Michael Gugan. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our workshop, we should do a group photo first, because this is such a memorable moment. 我们首先请我们林副署长、恭请副署长请上台，带领大家一起进行大合照. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let us all follow Deputy Director General Mr. Lin, welcoming Mr. Michael Gugan, Madame Helen Dai. Please welcome Zhou Qingtian. Please welcome Mr. Li Tuxin. Please come to the stage for the group photo. Okay, this is group photo part 1. Jane Liu, please. Cherry Hu, please. 侯组长请，还有我们张秘书长以及黄科长请。Okay, this is group photo part 1. We have 10 VIP guests. And after our 10 VIP guests, everyone should come up. All the rest should come up for group photo part 2. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Taiwan CDC says we should take off our face mask for the group photo. 报告副署长，我们防疫中心现在说，大家可以拿掉口罩拍照的时候 ，everybody, please take off your face mask. According to Taiwan CDC, yes. Okay, then we hold our banner for training results mutual recognition between Taiwan and Australia. Post-pandemic talent and skills mobility workshop. First photo, smile a wonderful smile because we have such a wonderful cooperation between Taiwan and Australia. 各位，我们这时候如果没拿相机的话，掌声鼓励一下，谢谢。Thank you so much. Now, if you have one hand free, just one hand, thumbs up. Thumbs up for our wonderful cooperation between Taiwan and Australia. Thank you so much. Taiwan and Australia, 赞! WDA, 赞! Thank you. Thank you. Just stay for a few seconds while everybody else comes up for the group photo. 我们现场所有的在座的嘉宾，第2张合照就需要您上台了。来，我们请站在舞台上 ，please。我们穿插站在第1排的人的肩膀跟肩膀之间。Row 2 are all the rest of us. 口罩请暂时拿掉。Thank you so much. And of course, Mr. Patterson and Mr. Crosby, you are in the photo as well. So it's okay. Have your drink. We're taking group photo part 2. Okay? Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Wayne. Please stay in the camera for the group photo part 2. Okay. Every one of us, 大会摄影师, please look at him. First photo, smile a wonderful smile. This is such a wonderful workshop with wonderful mutual cooperation and recognition. Okay. Our applause. 掌声, 掌声. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, one hand, thumbs up. Thumbs up. Right. This is our post-pandemic talent and skills mobility workshop. 赞! Australia! Taiwan! Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your thumbs up. Our online participants. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Wayne. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a wonderful moment to remember, and we remembered it with our group photo. Please be seated. Thank you so much. And Wayne, we're going to move on to you just about now. Okay. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Now we put our face mask back on, and please be seated. Moving on, Post-Pandemic Talent and Skills Mobility Workshop. Our first thing to do is our keynote speech. This is on the topic of benchmarking the skills International Occupational Standards Framework, a case on ASEAN. And to share with us on this wonderful topic is the Director of International and Business Development from William Angliss Institute. This is Mr. Wayne Crosby. Mr. Crosby?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction. to Mr. Lin from the WDA, to Mr. Gugan from the Australian Embassy, to all our friends from the WDA. I must say it's nice to be connecting with Taiwan again. I've got to say I'd rather be there in person, but it's a bit difficult to do that at the moment. Just listening to the introductions and the cooperation between the WDA and TDA, Australia and Taiwan. William Angliss has been fortunate to be part of that cooperation since the inception in 2011. And we've been able to participate in a number of forums, workshops, discussions, and even the pilot training programs for events. And we've been really pleased to be part of all of those activities. Today, what I've been asked to do is to talk about a case study that William Angliss has worked on in the ASEAN region since 2004. But what I thought I should do just for a minute or two is to let you know a little bit about William Angliss Institute, why we're here, and a bit of background about our work in the region, and particularly with mutual recognition arrangements. If you could move to the next slide, please. William Angliss has been operating since 1940, and we're a specialist centre in the tourism, hospitality, foods and events industry. We're quite a unique organisation in that we offer both vocational and higher education qualifications, but for this single industry sector. To give you an idea of our size, enrolments each year, 20,000 plus. We have more than 4,000 students from international countries studying with us in Australia and our overseas locations. We have 400 plus specialist academic support staff who are providing our clients with a range of services that we'll explore very briefly. Our courses range from short courses, micro-credentials, vocational diplomas and advanced diplomas through to degrees and master's programs, but all in the wonderful industry sector of tourism, hospitality, food and events. We also undertake quite a lot of consulting work for industry, for government and for education institutions. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of the locations that we operate in, excuse me, our main head office is in Melbourne. We have a campus in Sydney. We operate in all states and territories of Australia. We have our own campus in Singapore in partnership with the Singaporean government. We have a campus in Sri Lanka, a number of campuses in China, Thailand and Vietnam. And we also have partner arrangements with education institutions in Indonesia, Malaysia and the Philippines. Moving to the next slide. Just to give you a quick idea of the specialist areas that we cover, and I won't go through these in any detail, but as you can see on that list, everything to do with tourism, hospitality, foods and events. We have programs in, and those programs, as I mentioned before, can be in the vocational space or in the higher education space. And I must say, we've got a lot of pathways between vocational education and also higher education. Next slide, please. We do a lot of work, as I mentioned, with industry, governments and education institutions, and that's just a bit of a list of the organisations that we have worked with. And as you can see, most of the major international hotel groups we work with. I hope you haven't been to Macau, Singapore, or even Las Vegas, because if you've been to integrated resorts in those locations, you've probably lost more money than you've won. We work with the major airlines around the world, companies that run major asset arrangements in various locations. We work in multiple major events in various components of the tourism industry. And certainly our work with government has been a bit of a cornerstone of the work that we've done over a long period of time. That work with government started in Australia with the Victorian and then the Australian governments, but then moved overseas internationally, particularly with the 10 countries in the ASEAN region, but also in the Middle East. And that work is probably the reason that I've been asked to come along here and join your workshop today, because we've been quite fortunate to be participating in developing a mutual recognition arrangement framework for all of the 10 countries of ASEAN. And we did that starting in 2004-05, and we're still actually doing that at the moment. People sort of say, why a mutual recognition arrangement? What benefits does it have? How do you go about doing it? I want to try and cover some of that activity today, but certainly from the ASEAN region's perspective, the reason they wanted to enter into a mutual recognition arrangement is that they wanted to look at ASEAN as a region. And even though they are 10 countries in that region, they wanted to market themselves as a region. And to do that, they needed mutual recognition arrangements in a number of different industry sectors. The first, and I think one of the most important of those, is the tourism sector. And the challenge that each of the 10 countries faced was that in all of those 10 countries, the similar situation occurred. It was graduates coming out of their education and training system did not meet the needs that industry had and didn't meet the needs even government and individuals had. So the major objective of the mutual recognition arrangement was to solve that particular challenge. Tourism was seen as such an important component of each country's development because it was an industry that was so important for its economic growth. Every ASEAN country, and not unlike most countries around the world, tourism is a key component of their economic development plan. It's a very human resource intensive industry, so it always employs a lot of people. But to deliver standards of service that industry and individuals are demanding, skilled and trained labour is crucial. And all of the 10 ASEAN countries, no matter whether they were Singapore as being one of the most developed countries in ASEAN, or Myanmar or Laos, which were two of the least developed countries in ASEAN, they all had the same problem. They didn't have sufficient skilled labour to support the growth of industry. Why was that so? The reasons that were identified really came back to a lack of consistent vocational curriculum standards across the region. There were varied human resource capabilities across the region. So you could go to one country and have a wonderful experience, but perhaps when you went to the next country in ASEAN, that experience was not quite so good. So ASEAN as a region wanted to make sure they had consistent standards of service and product across those 10 countries. And one of the issues that they saw was that there was an absence of mutual recognition of skills and qualifications. That meant if you were qualified in one country, quite often the other 9 countries of ASEAN would not recognise those qualifications. So that made it really difficult for people to move around the region to service the growth in industry demand where it was occurring. And particularly, it became obvious that graduates of tourism courses, whether it was vocational or higher education, did not have the skill sets that were meeting the demand of industry. If we go to the next slide, please. The benefits of a mutual recognition if we can go to the next one, we missed that one. The benefits of a mutual recognition arrangement, and I'm talking specifically about tourism, and in ASEAN language, it's an MRATP, a mutual recognition arrangement for tourism professionals. What their mutual recognition arrangement was designed to do was to ensure and to facilitate the ability for skilled labour to be able to move around the region when it was required. I'll give you an example of where this was very relevant in ASEAN. If you have been to Singapore, you have probably seen the development of two very large integrated resorts there. One is Marina Bay Sands and the other is Resorts World at Sentosa. Both of those developments needed in excess of 20,000 skilled tourism employees to support those operations. Singapore, quite frankly, did not have the scale of skilled labour to draw on. So it needed to draw on labour from around the region. The way it did that, it was wanting to only employ people who had the appropriate skills and qualifications to do the job. And the mutual recognition arrangement enabled them to do that, because as long as employees had qualifications from any of the 10 countries, as long as they were ASEAN certified, those qualifications were recognised, employees were able to come into Singapore and undertake the jobs that were required. So a perfect example of how the mutual recognition arrangement worked well in one ASEAN country. The MRA also ensured that there was conformity in competency-based training, whereas previously you could undertake perhaps a diploma in one country and a diploma in another. Not only were they very different in their outcomes, but one diploma could be done in a couple of weeks, whereas another diploma could be done in a couple of years. So employers were very confused at the skill level of people holding similar qualifications. So the MRA ensured that anybody who held a certificate that was ASEAN endorsed, employers knew those people had the correct skills to do the job. And what that did, it also enabled workers who had no certification, but who were quite skilled and experienced, they were able to undertake a skills assessment or recognition of prior learning, or whatever the words you want to use are, but their skills were recognised, they were able to be certified, and therefore they could get qualifications based on their industry experience and skill, not necessarily any training and education undertaking. All this made sure that graduates coming out of training institutions had the skills that industry required, and that the quality of tourism services were improved. If we go to the next slide, the process that we undertook with those 10 countries in ASEAN, we started by helping them develop competency standards for 33 job titles, and we developed 242 competency standards with our ASEAN partners so that we could ensure that all qualifications had the necessary skill sets in them. Then we packaged those competency standards into particular qualifications, and that developed the Common ASEAN Tourism Curriculum. That curriculum was then put into a qualifications framework structure, and a skills recognition system to support that went with it. It was then decided that we needed to have complementary training and assessment resources that were consistent amongst all countries and education providers. So we developed what were called toolboxes. If we go to the next slide. Sorry, just having a little technical issue here. We developed toolboxes for each of those 242 competency standards across what were called 6 labour divisions, and the labour divisions of housekeeping, front office, food production, food and beverage service, travel agencies and tour operations. So we developed a resource package for all trainers, all trainees and students and all assessors that had the necessary information in it for them to be able to train effectively using the competency-based resources and assess effectively. We also did an analysis of each of the countries to identify if they had any structural weaknesses in their frameworks of education, training and employment, and assisted in filling in some of those gaps. And the final piece of the puzzle was really to develop the capability of trainers and educators to be able to utilise those training resources effectively, to deliver excellent standards of training and education, but also to be able to deliver relevant assessment to ensure that people were competent to undertake jobs. And finally, I think in the last phase of the work that we've been doing, it's been assisting each of those 10 countries in implementing the mutual recognition arrangement for tourism professionals effectively. Each of those countries are at different stages of development. So each of those countries needed different activities to undertake to ensure that their framework for the MRA was working effectively. And finally, we've been working on emerging industry sectors that were not in the initial ASEAN framework, sectors such as the MICE and events sector, health tourism, marine tourism, and also spa activity. So the next stage of the work, or the last stage of the work, has been working on emerging industry sectors. If we go to the next stage, thank you. In the development stages, sorry, one back, yep, that's it. The stages that we really went through to accomplish all this is that we needed to consult widely with stakeholders, and those stakeholders were industry, government and educators. We looked at the competency standards that were already in existence. And you know, there are APEC standards, there are ASEAN standards, there are Australian standards. Everybody's got standards. And the idea was not to reinvent the wheel, it was already there. So we simply rationalised those standards, made them appropriate for the ASEAN countries and developed those standards along that basis. We then put the competence together, curriculum frameworks, qualifications frameworks, skills recognition system, and developing the assessment and training resources. Those resources had a trainee manual, a trainer guide, an assessor manual, and a range of PowerPoint slides to assist both training and assessment. The important thing about this whole development process was that after each stage, we got sign-off from all of the stakeholders in each of the 10 countries. That was not an easy exercise because, yes, ASEAN wants to be one region, but they are also friendly competitors. And each of them were very patriotic towards their own systems that they had. And what this meant was you didn't need to throw out or get rid of the system you already had. You simply needed to supplement your system with anything that was in the ASEAN system that was missing in yours. If we move to the last slide, really what the outcomes and benefits for ASEAN were, and there were benefits for everybody. Government benefited by having a really healthy and growing responsive tourism industry. Workers, tourism professionals benefit because they had a whole range of new jobs, salary structures and employment pathways. Industry got better skilled human resources, provided better service. Education providers had higher graduate employment rates, and society overall benefited greatly because minority groups and particularly small and medium enterprises were helped develop their professionalism in the industry. So that is the case study of ASEAN, and I'll look forward to perhaps receiving some questions from you at some later stage. Thanks for your time today.
Okay, thank you very much to Director Mr. Wayne Crosby. He has had 40 years of experience working with the international tourism and hospitality industry. Thank you for your insight and sharing. That was Director of the International Business Development at William Angliss Institute, which is based in Melbourne, Australia. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our next speaker. He is a very experienced CEO with over 2 decades of experience in providing senior leadership and direction for businesses in the education industry, including vocational education and training, VET, and also higher education. And his current role, he is the CEO of KCA Education, that is an Australian VET provider that focuses on delivering quality training in the sectors of early childhood education, aged care, community services, and social media marketing. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome CEO of Kirana Colleges Australia, Mr. Tony Patterson.
Thank you. Ni hao, or as we say in Australia, g'day. Distinguished guests from the Australian office and also WDA, it's a pleasure to be here. As Wayne had mentioned, we would normally be in Taiwan delivering this in person. However, the challenges over the last few years has meant that we've still been able to connect, but in a very, very different way. It was very interesting listening to Wayne's presentation because I'm also a veteran of the hospitality and tourism industry, and I know William Angliss very well. So to hear the wonderful work they've actually been doing in ASEAN is very refreshing, and obviously it's a sign of the times when we're looking at mutual recognition. What I would like to actually talk to you today about is RPL. Next slide, please. Sorry, before I move on to that, KCA has been working in Taiwan since 2019. Thanks to our friends in Austrade, we signed an MOU and an agreement with a leading university in Taipei, and we have currently running a program in the aged care sector with them. Apart from that, Taiwan is our fourth largest cohort for our students in Sydney. And we are, as mentioned, a vocational education and training provider that does specialise in aged care, childcare, community services, and other employable or skill shortage courses. But what I'm here today to talk about is RPL, recognition of prior learning. And there is a lot of information in my slides that I am sure you have access to. So rather than talk about all the points in the slides, I'd like to talk through the process about what is RPL and how does RPL work, a framework for RPL that we have in Australia and the process in Australia. In saying that, I know that the great work with WDA and also as Wayne has mentioned, that these relationships are existing and they already are working. So a lot of what I am saying is probably already implemented. However, it's good to also get it, I suppose, from a different perspective. Next slide, please. So RPL itself, or recognition of prior learning, is another way for a person to actually gain a qualification. But in RPL, the process is assessed on the person's competency based on what they have actually acquired through either formal or informal learning to determine whether they actually meet the requirements to be issued either with a unit of competency or a subject or a full qualification. What RPL means is that the person that's actually studying or undertaking the RPL assessment, they do not have to study what they already know. Instead, they provide the evidence that they already have the skills and the knowledge to either meet the qualification or the unit that they're seeking RPL in. Now, in Australia, RPL can be gained through certificates, diplomas, right through to advanced diplomas or associate degrees, associate diplomas. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Tony, if you could turn on your camera,
RPL
please.
process
Your camera's switched off, Tony.
Responsibility of the organisation. So it's the organisation that determines how they're going to look after RPL. And typically it's about identifying the evidence that's required by the student, providing advice to the student about the process, what they actually need to submit, how they need to submit it. Also providing with the student with sufficient information so they can actually prepare the evidence that's required for the RPL process. There's also a number of ways of assessing RPL, and the organisation will actually look at that. Oh. Sorry, I was just told my camera was turned off. Sorry about that, my apologies. So the organisation will determine the appropriate evidence gathering methods and tools in order to grant the RPL. Of course, the organisation is also responsible for either granting a qualification, granting a unit, or identifying some skill gaps. Next slide, please. So when we talk about assessments, one of the key things with RPL assessment is that whoever's doing the assessment, either an academic, a teaching staff, a trainer, they must have expertise in either the qualification or the skill that they're actually RPLing. So if they don't know the qualification, they don't know the requirements of the skills, it becomes a challenge in actually looking at the assessment. Because the assessment itself and the person being assessed, it must be under the same standards and the same requirements as if they were actually doing the course itself. One of the things that in Australia, and I think Wayne spoke about every country having standards, when it actually comes to standards, we have to make sure that the assessment itself and the materials that are actually given are not only relevant to the subject, but they're also valid, authentic, current, and sufficient in order to ensure the person undertaking the RPL meets the requirements. But also the process itself needs to be fair, flexible, reliable, and provide valid outcomes. Next slide, please. So when we look at RPL methods, one of the things that is really important, and this is very important if working with Taiwan or working with other offshore partners, that we need to understand the literacy level of the person. We need to understand the cultural background and also the experience of the student, because it may not be the same as it is in Australia. But it's really important to understand that the evidence that's actually given, whether it be formal or informal or documented, must actually meet the requirements of the qualification or the skill that the person is actually applying for RPL. Also, the organisation conducting the RPL should always not just look at one assessment method, but a range of assessments to ensure that the student meets the requirements. Next slide, please. Some of these will include, sorry, before I go, one of the most important things about this, sorry, if you could go back one slide. Assessment methods. So what, and I think Wayne spoke about this in their mutual recognition. It's very important to be able to have a mapping document that maps out not only the qualification that you're looking to grant, but mapping out the evidence that's required to support that. And most organisations will do that as a part of the RPL process. But other items that could actually be used as assessment methods could be questioning, and they could be oral or written. It could be records of completed training. So the person making the RPL application may have done some formal or informal training that may add to the RPL assessment process. It could be their resume. It could be observations of them in the work placement. Quite often students will actually provide a portfolio and that portfolio will allow the assessor to make a judgment on the prior knowledge and skills that the person has. I've seen RPL come through where employers have given them references. These can all be part of an RPL kit to support the RPL or recognition of prior learning, either for the unit or the qualification. However, what's really important is that knowledge and that information, the person must have at least 6 months of relevant experience within that industry or within that skill set that they're actually applying for RPL. And that evidence must be for the last 5 years, because industry skills, everything changes very quickly. Somebody may have some prior qualifications that were 20 years ago that aren't relevant in today's environment. So it's important that it's current, valid, and it can actually meet the qualification that they're seeking RPL for. However, RPL itself, and when we talk about RPL, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. RPL, while it's a great way for somebody to gain a qualification without having to undertake the study, and as Wayne mentioned, it's a mutual recognition of skill. However, it doesn't actually occur in a vacuum. It needs a system or a framework to work. So next slide, please. So in Australia, one of the frameworks we have consists of a number of parts where RPL fits in. Now, I know after working in Taiwan and seeing the work for the WDA and seeing the competency-based and the skills-based, I believe that there is a framework that is in place. But I just thought I'd talk about what we do in Australia. So the framework that we have that supports RPL is AQF, or the Australian Qualifications Framework, our training packages, the Australian Vocational Education System, VET, which I'm involved in, and also I thought I mentioned about registered training organisations that are an organisation that do RPL. Next slide, please. So AQF actually underpins our national education system, and it sets the criteria and standards for higher eds or universities, vocational providers, as well as training schools. AQF in Australia sets the criteria for every qualification. It provides qualification descriptors and the learning outcomes. But it's really important to understand that it's only organisations that are approved by the Australian government are authorised to actually deliver accredited training. Next slide, please. So typically AQF runs from certificate 1, 2, 3, which tend to be at a schooling or a vocational level, all the way through to bachelor or postgraduate, which is AQF level 10. Next slide, please. Training packages, and Wayne alluded to this. So training packages are actually developed by service skills organisation to meet the needs of an industry or a group of industries. While they don't suggest how people should be trained, they do specify the skills and knowledge that's actually required in order to perform effectively in the workplace. So a training package is made up of a number of components. One is a unit of competency, or some people refer to them as subjects, which define the skills and knowledge that's required. A number of unit of competencies that put together actually go into step 2, which is a qualification framework. And I think, again, Wayne had mentioned about the units of competencies that were mapped and then put into a qualification. But the training packages also provide the assessment guidelines. And these are things that assessors need to look at a student to find out whether they're actually meet the needs of the competency of that qualification or the unit. Next slide, please. So as a vocational provider, vocational itself not only enables the student to gain qualifications and experience, but it gives them the skills to find employment. So vocational, unlike higher ed, is competency-based and it's hands-on. And the vocational sector is crucial, I think it was mentioned earlier as well, to not only the Australian economy, but also to develop a national workforce, as well as it's a major exporter for Australia as well. So when we do talk about vocational providers, we have technical and further education, or TAFEs, which Wayne is a TAFE. And TAFE typically are owned by the government or operated by the government. We also have private providers. We are a private provider that is owned either by an individual, corporation, or a group of companies. But whether we are a TAFE or a private provider, we're actually regulated by the Australian Skills and Quality Authorisation, or ASQA, as an RTO. So we are all registered training organisations. And that is actually what controls the consistency, it controls the skill, and it controls the quality when it actually comes to our training. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, RTOs are a training provider that's approved by ASQA, our regulatory body. RTOs, as an approved training provider, ensures that students are actually getting consistent, quality assured training, and that the actual training meets the national requirements of the training packages. RTOs normally deliver certificate 3 levels up to vocational graduate diplomas. And as mentioned earlier, they can be government-based TAFEs, or they can be private providers. In Australia, currently, there's about 5,000 RTOs, and we all must meet the standards. And Wayne again mentioned standards, which for us is the RTO training standards of 2015. Of course, RTOs can also undertake another level of registration, which is our CRICOS, or Commonwealth Registration for Institutions for Overseas Students. And we are a CRICOS provider, meaning we can deliver vocational training to students in Australia, but also overseas. Next slide, please. So the reason I wanted to talk about the framework, and the reason that I wanted to talk about training packages and consistency and what we need to do as a training provider, is that RPL itself sits within that. So you can't just do RPL without actually having a context or a framework. And RPL has some really good advantages. It does actually recognise somebody's prior skills and knowledge and informal experience. It also means that the person undertaking the RPL does not have to undertake formal study. One of the things I think the RPL process is the best at, and that is identifying skills gaps. So I've used RPL a lot to identify a skills gap. So somebody may have great experience, prior knowledge, but in order to get a qualification, there may be some gaps in their learning that needs to actually be either delivered or reinforced. Also, once a person has a qualification, depending where they are, that may lead to more employability, better wages, better roles. And I've actually found that a lot of people that go through the RPL process will quite often use that for further study. Again, a big advantage with RPL, there's no time away from work. However, there's also some disadvantages from RPL. Trying to understand how the RPL and the assessment aligns to a training package in order to try to work out what evidence the person needs to put forward can be difficult, but it can also be very time consuming. Also, sometimes you will have inexperienced trainers or assessors that will actually look at doing the RPL, and there's an old thing about tick and flick. So they just look at the evidence, but they actually don't go further. They grant somebody a qualification who really may have some skills, but misses the learning. Another disadvantage too is often a perception. And this sometimes can be the perception of self or the learner, or the perception of the employer. I have been in situations with RPL where people go through the process, but sometimes they don't believe they've earned the qualification because they haven't done the learning. Some employers, when they actually find out that qualification has also been gained through RPL, sometimes don't see that as being as good as if the person has actually gone and done the qualification in a classroom or a university. Last slide, please. So in summary, RPL is another great option for a way for a person to gain a qualification that's based on their current or past experience. It does remove the need for formal study, and it's very, very good at assisting in identifying skills gaps. However, it doesn't require a level of expertise for the organisation and the assessors that are actually looking to undertake the RPL process. And while RPL in theory saves time and money, from experience in practice, it can actually be quite costly as well. Not only to find the staff, but costly in the time for the person to put together the evidence. I've actually had a couple of cases where by the time a student has put forward the evidence for the RPL, they could have actually studied the course and have gained the qualification either online, blended, or in the classroom. So if we're actually looking at setting up mutual recognition between Australia and Taiwan, it's important that we not only look at developing the framework, but we have an understanding of what is expected from a unit of competency or a qualification, what is the assessment requirements, what is the evidence that is required to deem the person as competent in order to be issued either with the qualification or with skills gap or with a unit of study. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sure there's going to be more questions at the end, and I trust that this has actually added some value to today's workshop. 谢谢.
谢谢. Thank you very much, CEO of Kirana Colleges Australia. Thank you for turning your camera back on because we want to see your charming appearance. It does add to your slides. Thank you, Tony. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our third speaker, this presentation is on the topic of post-pandemic talents and skills mobility, CPTPP, and human resource development. This is a big topic, and to speak to us about this big topic is our next speaker. He's currently the Senior Deputy Executive Director of Taiwan WTO and RTA Center at Zhonghua Institute for Economic Research, and he specialized in trade liberalization policy, and he is also specialized in WTO, servicing trade, non-tariff measures, and many areas, including regional integration. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Li Chun for our presentation.
Thank you very much. It's unfortunate that we cannot really see each other physically. I do hear the claps from the side, and hopefully next time we'll be able to meet everybody, including Tony and other speakers and the audience physically, and finger crossed. Let me just start sharing my slide. For the next 15 to 20 minutes, I would like to bring in a slightly different dimension when we are discussing the topic of talent and skill mobility. I hope my slide's working now. Right, okay. Now, the topic I have been assigned for is post-pandemic talents and skill mobility, and with a special focus on the role CPTPP, which stands for the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the latest one and one of the most significant regional free trade agreement that is in the Asia-Pacific area, and also the role of the Human Resources Development Working Group under especially the APEC umbrella. But let me start with the first a kind of background to start with the discussion. Now, the talents and the skills or the skills that are required for our next generation workforce during the post-pandemic have to be understood against the background of a new economic structure. Many things have changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these changes will be transitory, so things will be back to normal after the pandemic, but many of the changes appears to be permanent. For example, there's now a lot of discussions on the the rise of the so-called low-touch economy. Low-touch economy is an economic structure that has certainly emerged as a response to the pandemic prevention measures and also to the elevated awareness of consumers and citizens on their health and other welfare requirements. For example, there's a significant change of consumer behaviors in terms of payments. There's one survey here in Taiwan showing that there's an increasing number of people who are not happy to touch on any physical money notes because they believed that physical money or notes are actually an important means of transmitting virus, not only COVID-19, but other viruses. So there's an increasing, a higher level of acceptance or inclination of consumers to move on to electronic payments as their primary way of paying when they are purchasing something. Right? And also there's a change, consumer behavior change that require a larger space between when they are, dining out or flying an airplane and sitting in accommodation facility. And also for healthcare services, for example, there's also a significant change of consumer requirement that will require healthcare providers to offer a higher level of confidence and also a comfort of mind when consumers or patients are receiving medical treatments or other services. Now, in order to meet the new demand, because of the changed consumer behavior, we are seeing also a shift of industrial or the way services providers deliver their services, right? And so there's an increasing number of service providers that are now converting to e-payments and other electronic payments to avoid to meet the demand of avoiding physical touching on physical money notes. And all this, in order to meet the new demand, you need to introduce new resources. Not only budgetary or physical resources, but also introducing new talent or new human resources to design and also to undertake and deliver all these changes. And also, in order to implement all these new changes, you need to introduce new technologies. And again, you require new resources, including human resources, when you are planning to introduce new technologies. For example, I believe in the last in the first 12 months of the pandemic, the IT support staff of all companies and institutions are the busiest group of people running around trying to fix webinar facilities and trying to get the internet right, and also facilitating colleagues and people working from home and providing access to database that they used to do physically on site. So this, the rise of the new touch economy definitely is changing a lot of structure in not only in economic terms, but also in the demand for labor. For example, in this chart prepared by the McKinsey Global Institute earlier this year, it demonstrates that there is a significant change in labor demand and the need for job transition. For example, according to McKinsey or MGI, in the short term, there is a significant increase of health aides, technicians, and wellness support labor demand. And also there's a significant increase of healthcare professionals and the STEAM workers, that is workers that come from a science engineering background is also on the rise. But there's also, on the other hand, a significant decrease of workforce in the office support area. And also there's a significant decline of workforce in the consumer service and sales area. I think it is reasonable given the fact that many companies, in order to react to the rise of the new touch economy, are now moving their physical sales to online mode, and also to move their consumer services from in a more automatic or AI-based delivery mode. So in terms of occupation transition, according to MGI, by the year 2030, there will be 28% of the total workforce in the United States that require some kind of job transition. 21 in Germany, 14 in UK, and 13 in China. I think Taiwan is somewhere between, for example, UK and China. I'm not sure the situation in Australia, but I think it will be similar to Germany or the UK. So a lot of preparations are required to facilitate the workforce for this new normal, new economic normal during and especially post-pandemic. First of all, it is actually very important to be aware that the future of work arrives ahead of schedule. So all the original plans before the pandemic has to be replanned and rescheduled. And it is important to understand the likely impact of this change of workforce, and also the requirement for work job transition. So the awareness of both employees and employers is important. The second one is the adoption of digital tools. Many of my colleagues use a webinar facility for the first time in their life, in their professional life, in the last 12 months. And I think they are gradually adapting to this new working environment, but there were people who are still struggling to get on board with all this digital transformation. So the adoption of digital tools, not only they're familiar with the tools, but also being able to utilize as part of their job delivery. And also reskilling of the workforce is very important. So reskilling in order to meet the new job demand, and also reskilling to meet a new working environment, and providing both employees and employers the flexibility needed in a new economic structure. So this is probably the context of talents and skills post the pandemic. But we are already seeing challenges for the workforce, and also for the economic in general, to meet the new demand or the new normal. First of all, we are seeing a very significant problem of talent or workforce shortage. For example, according to one survey, close to 70% of companies under the survey are delaying or halting their international assignments because of the COVID-19. So most companies, if they are planning for international assignments, are facing some kind of restrictions in the last 12 to 24 months. And the restrictions are, there were a lot of uncertainties about removing the restrictions. For example, the new surge of new variants of the COVID virus are now prompting countries to reintroduce border control. Right? So there were a lot of uncertainties, and in the foreseeable future, we are not expecting a full return or full removal of the restriction of global mobility. The second one is a lot of companies are facing the new reality of a smaller talent pool, and also a skill shortage. For example, IT support staff is on the shortage because all companies are now thirsty for digital transformation project and programs. And also we are facing a much smaller talent pool for both white and blue collar workers. For example, in Taiwan's case, many of the we stopped migrant worker entry for the last, or I think 10 to 12 months. So many of the factories here are facing a severe problem of labor shortage because of the restriction on the movement of migrant workers. And for many companies, flexibility, agility, and a new mindset are needed. They need to rewrite their program relating to talents and skills. And also they need to reconsider programs to introduce trainings or reskilling programs for their existing staff rather than relying on international or other assignments that face a lot of challenge and restrictions under the COVID-19. So now we come to the role of CPTPP and the APEC HDR. I have to say CPTPP is in essence a trade agreement. So there is a chapter in the CPTPP addressing the problem, the issue of professional mobility. But most of the rules and commitments under CPTPP are related to the normal before the pandemic, right? There's a lacking of provisions or there's a lacking of commitments relating to addressing the problem of restrictions because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And also, so CPTPP probably similar to what APEC, the role APEC can play. We are actually at this stage looking at the creation of a regional forum for information exchange, right? So countries need to better understand the situation in other countries in terms of talent and skill mobility, and also in terms of border control and other restrictions, so that they can reduce the uncertainties or to increase their ability to predict the future development of whether mobility will be restrictions on mobility will be removed or there will be other conditions or restrictions that are coming into light, and also to exchange experiences of, for example, border relaxation, and also experiences to how can we resume partial mobility of talents and workers across border in light of the COVID-19. For example, in Taiwan's case, because domestically we have 0 confirmed cases for the last couple of weeks already, but so we tend to have a much stringent border control measures vis-a-vis other peering economies in this part of the world. So experience sharing is important in order for Taiwan and other countries to resume the confidence of receiving international the movement of international talents and workers. And also CPTPP and the APEC can provide a platform for confidence building and the consensus, right? Currently, every country is introducing their own control and pandemic control measures according to their local conditions. But there will be areas and issues, for example, mobilities of talents that require regional cooperation and coordination. So, and that before we move on to coordination and facilitation, we need to rebuild the confidence of cross-country mobility. And of course, it will be a good idea to start promoting some kind of small-scale pilot programs that facilitate the rebuilding of confidence and also to facilitate a much larger relaxation of mobility restrictions. And finally, we need CPTPP and APEC can serve as a platform for policy coordination to accelerate or to shorten the time for the removal of limitation. Currently, there were a lot of discussions in the APEC and also under the CPTPP on the removal of restrictions on trade and investment because of the COVID-19. So perhaps the next step is to bring the discussion of human mobility, talent and skill mobilities into the agenda of CPTPP and also the APEC, such that it will be mutually beneficial for all participating countries in these two forums to facilitate the economy to back to a new normal in a much shorter time frame. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to Dr. Li Chun, our Senior Deputy Executive Director from Taiwan WTO RTA Center of Zhonghua Institute for Economic Research. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time now for us to take a short break for about 10 minutes. And when we come back, we'll be talking about an analysis to Taiwan vocational training system, that of carpentry. We'll be right back. Don't go away. 好。好的，各位嘉宾，我们10分钟的休息时间，再过1分半就要直播了，请各位长官、各位贵宾请入座。谢谢大家，谢谢您。您可以带餐点回到座位上慢慢享用。对，我只是给大家压。对，我听你的指示啊，你觉得这样好就好了。
OK，
前面都是讨论，现在正式开始的东西，你是导播。
没有，我现在是说先不用，我觉得待会下一个简报者简报完之后会接嘛，然后接了之后你会请他们说我们要进入 Q&A 啦，那我们就是请他们把那个
不必回问，没有任何敬畏。对，除非他 ending 自动转过来的话，那再说。
OK， 那不会。后来我跟他讲不会转过来，就是说基本上简报者完之后会接嘛，接着你要给那个
都是话外音。
对，我知道。这时候你有请就是线上的开 monitor 开，那时候请他打开对 Q&A 的时候，
那2个澳洲的。
对。
好
，OK， 那时候我讲，我提醒他们一下。
听懂了，因为 panel 有他们。对，
所以这个简报还暂时现场的简报者先不用，这个现场简报者就是话外音之后，我会 take 现场的简报者。
简报者讲完之后，我就提醒他们打开镜头。
对，
就交给主持人。好，谢谢。跟长官回来，给我他自己回来了，跟那个很大的长官，就是那就是安全部长陈教授。那你倒数画面还会出现吗？还是我直接听你 Q？ 就是可以不用，我等你。Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed your coffee break, and now we are back to our workshop. It is time for our topic on international mutual recognition of training and results, an analysis of Taiwan vocational training system, especially that of carpentry. And to share with us, we have WDA YCN branch carpentry competency expert, Mr. Li Tuxing. Please, all yours. Thank you.
Our Deputy Director General, all of our distinguished guests on site, and all of our friends in Australia in education and training, all of our friends online. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to introduce myself first. In 2013, I took part in the Australian Carton College, and our current vocational training bureau in Taiwan, and there was a training package, TAE 40110 training package in Australia, and I underwent the entire process, and I understood the vocational training and assessment structure in Australia. And this training course is currently through cooperation between Taiwan and Australia. The training course has been localized in Taiwan, and I am currently one of the lecturers in promoting this training course. And every year we train 100 to 200 assessors and for this vocational training assessment. And these are ongoing projects. And today I am going to talk about an analysis to Taiwan vocational training system using carpentry as example. First of all, we need to understand what carpentry is all about. If we think about it in a traditional sense, in the international skills, the WSC, the World Skills Competition, we're talking about partitions, interior fixing, and furniture, and carpentry. And today, we cannot look at the whole spectrum, so we're looking at mainly the interior decorating. So when, everything that's to do with carpentry, when you are decorating a house, that's what we're doing, what we're talking about today. And when we talk about interior fixing, I've also have with me the expert Zhou Qingtian from our carpentry competency, and we thought about the name we should use for this course, and then we decided that we were going to call it the interior fixing training course, and we call it carpentry in brackets. In the past, we call it carpentry or interior fixing, and it's very difficult to recruit students because students or parents, they find it too low level and do not want their children to enroll in these courses. So we wanted to make the program name sound better without fooling anyone. So we thought it should be a hands-on practice training program for carpentry, but we name it under interior fixing, because under interior fixing, if you're a carpentry, you're in metal work, you're in the plumbing, everything is in it. The AC and everything is all part of interior fixing. But there are at least 40 to 50 different types of works. We can't just call it interior fixing. So we have carpentry in brackets. But so ultimately, it's still about carpentry. It's still all about wood. And in our course, it started in 2019, we started developing this course. And last year, in 2020, we passed through the Ministry of Labor. There is this mechanism in the Ministry of Labor which has this ICAP program, and to So through this effective system, which we call the accreditation or certification of the training program quality, we can really assess this program. So if we want to certify the program, it needs to undergo assessment, and there is the analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation, all 5 aspects. If everything we have designed and implemented can meet the requirements, and there are 31 criteria, and if we all meet the criteria, then we will receive this ICAP certificate. So if you look at this picture on the right-hand side, once our trainee passes the program and pass the evaluation program for each of the courses, then they will be issued an ICAP certificate, and at the back of the certificate, it will spell out all of the courses that they underwent and the hours they underwent in these courses. And ultimately, we decided to call this the interior fixing practice brackets carpentry course, with a total of 860 hours in the program. Now, at WDA, we would like to train the unemployed workers with some basic carpentry skills for employment. So the goal and the objective of this training program is to equip unemployed workers with basic carpentry skills, and before completing the training, we help them to assist them in taking the test for level B technician test, and that is equivalent to a technician in practice. So this program was developed in reference to the Australian competence program. So we need to have a competency standard established. And again, on the platform, ICAP platform of WDA, you can see there are 600 standards issued, one of which is called Competency Standards of Carpentry Practitioners. And the code, you can find the code here, and basically our reference is in accordance with this standard. And within the standards, it mainly contains some knowledge or skills or hands-on skills. And in terms of the hands-on skills, you need to learn about the ceiling, floor, partition, wooden cabinet, door, and window frames. And upon completion of the program, they can go into technicians of decoration industry or wooden furniture factories, or indoor decoration companies. And if you have acquired enough experiences and your own skills, you become very skilled, you may decide to become self-employed or go into construction contracts. And the development of this program started in 2019, May 8th, when we invited, I was the expert in competency, and we have a skills expert, because ultimately we want our competency to really meet the requirements of the industry. So we have experts in the designing the program, which is Mr. Zhou, and also an expert in the industry requirements to make sure that our program really meets the requirements of the industries. And we also wanted to understand the competency standard of an actual carpenter, and to understand if that standard can really align with the industry requirements. And with our experts from the curriculum and also the industry to understand if the carpentry standard really meets the requirement. And we can see, okay, this is what we are really teaching in our program, and this is what we really require in our industry. And then we can make sure that once they graduate from this program, they really will be able to go into practice and be employed. And then I further go on to interview our 2 experts and to see if, based on this structure, we can come up with different learning units. So we came up with 8 units, and I will go into detail later on other pages. So first of all, we defined our structure and our restructured learning units. And then we go back to verify to see if our previous analysis were correct and the credibility and the effectiveness. So we went into our assessment period where we invited 5 experts from the industry and 1 expert in curriculum and 1 in competency, and also the section chief of our YCN branch to participate in our experts assessment program. And that was this is the photo of our meeting then. And in this meeting, we mainly discussed if this program really meet the demands of the industry and if the competency standard referred to is appropriate, and the target of this program are the restructured units suitable, and the priority or the sequence of these learning programs, and also the trainees. Are there any special requirements for these trainees when we are recruiting them? These are all things that we need to look into. And once everything has been established in 2019, 13th of July, we held another meeting, which is regarding the design and development of the courses. And in this meeting, we looked at the training goals of these units and the syllabus of them, and what are the methods that we can apply, the resources we can apply, and also the ways and the tools of evaluation and the people that are required for evaluation. And for these different units, how are we going to evaluate them? What's the process of evaluation and what's the tools for evaluation? And ultimately, we need to discuss what are the evidence of evaluation we need at the end of this course. And everything that has been decided, we go into implementing the courses. And by mid-December, we have completed our first course, and we held another assessment meeting, which really is a post-program briefing to an evaluation and review to confirm our training in 27th of December in 2019. And we invited 2 trainees to join us to see how they felt towards the program and their feedback. And most importantly, we wanted to take the opportunity to really invite all of our experts to again review our training materials to see if the training materials really are in line with our syllabus, and to see if the evaluations really do match the goals that we set. And we confirmed that everything matched. We collected enough evidence and we submitted it to the course quality certification program, and we passed the ICAP at the Ministry of Labor. And now we look at the trainees and their requirements. In terms of trainees, we need to first decide who do we want to recruit. Now, the WDA wants to encourage the unemployed and people who do not have skills. So our trainees target at unemployed or job seekers who are interested in carpentry. So these are our target. And for the people, the trainees that we would like to recruit, we decided that we don't really need certain specific requirements, but because there are mathematic calculations required, so we probably need people with high school or vocational school diploma or equivalent. And these are the restructured units, because I mentioned earlier on that there were 8 restructured units, among which 6 of them are academic units and 2 are practical units that require hands-on practices, and among which we can see that the hours that are allocated to these units and the level that it relates to. And in terms of level, when we talk about the 3rd and the 4th level, the main difference between them is that in Taiwan, we have 6 levels in these competency skills, and level 3 and 4, which means that you can independently perform your job in a regular situation, and you must be able to decide for yourself what you're going to do. And for level 4 is you need to be able to independently perform your job in terms of planning and designing with somewhat changes in your environment, and you must be able to determine and make decisions. So we can see that there is a difference between level 3 and level 4. So in graphics, 16 hours are required, and it's equivalent to it's a level 4 course. Fixing introduction is 40 hours and level 4. Tool usage method is 16 hours and level 3. Getting to know the materials requires 16 hours, and it's a level 3 course. The laws and regulations regarding the interior fixing, it requires 32 hours. And I remember that when I was taking the courses in Australia, Australia really placed a lot of emphasis on the laws and regulations regarding these interior fixing or carpentry. So we understood that that was very important. So we allocated 32 hours to it. And there's also the budget evaluation and management. 32 hours are required, and it's a level 4 course. In terms of carpentry internship, because that is the key of the entire program, so 500 hours are allocated to it, and it's a level 4 unit. There's the general practice internship, which requires 148 hours, and that's also a level 4 unit. In terms of the learning channel or the learning map of this program, you can see that it starts with graphics and tool usage method, and these two may be held at the same time, and at the same time there would be carpentry internship. But you must be able, you must first complete graphics and tool usage method to further go into getting to know the materials, the fixing introduction, and the laws and regulations. And you must complete all 3 units before you go further on to budget evaluation and management. And in terms of hands-on practice, you start with the more basic carpentry internship before we go into the general application internship. So that's basically because we have 8 learning units, and I would like to go into details regarding 3 of them because we don't have enough time to go through all 8 of them. And in terms of graphics, we ask that our trainees need to be able to correctly identify carpentry graphics or signs after you have completed this unit. And the contents include professional graphics and signs, fixing graphics introduction, and on-site measuring and sampling. These are paving the way for practical internship. In terms of laws and regulations, it requires the importance of it requires the trainees to understand the importance of laws and regulations to be able to manage indoor fixing, occupational safety and health, because sometimes our carpenters, they do go into individual private homes, so they need to understand the laws and regulations regarding certain of these buildings. And it also requires, for example, the internship and also the internship unit. You need to be able to understand the basic methods, including the plane, the dig, the drill, grind, cut. And in terms of ceiling and floor, closet, cupboard, and even partition, doors and windows, these are all the basic skills that they need to learn. In terms of the teaching method, in addition to why don't we have a lecture for general application internship? Because everything has been talked about earlier on in the previous 7 units. You don't need to further lecture in the final general application internship. But others, including the tool usage method, will require the trainers to really demonstrate how to use them. So we can see that's Mr. Zhou kneeling on the floor using one of those handheld cutting tools to demonstrate how to use these tools. And in terms of internship and general application internship, pilot teaching is required and practical exercise is also required. At the end of the units, we evaluate them with these methods. So for the previous 6 academic units, we take paper tests. And in the X2 exercise units, they have exercise tests and they have their corresponding evaluation tools and proofs of result. These are the photographs of our programs when the units were taking place. So the right-hand side, the upper right-hand side, you have the tool usage method where Mr. Zhou is again demonstrating the bench saw and demonstrating how that is used. And in terms of this, the top 2 photographs here are lectures, and the bottom 2 photographs are the carpentry internship and journal application internship. And you can see they need to actually put together a piece of furniture or whatever they were working on. And this is our program evaluation. So for the 6 units, the academic units, they take paper tests. You can see the trainees taking the tests on at their seats. And this would be the evaluation for carpentry internship. They need to start with choosing their material, to drawing the lines, to cutting them, to assembling them. So you can see that's the ceiling, that's the wall board, and that's the door, the window, and even a small closet. This is also an evaluation for general application internship. They are putting together everything that includes the ceiling, the wall, the partition, and the boards and everything. They need to be able to really perform all of this to graduate from the program.
Our carpentry competency expert. At the present, Mr. Li Chuxing is the chairman of China Competence Development and Training Association. The goal of this association is to try to support and implement the development of competence standards and courses. Wonderful sharing, hands-on training for carpentry. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at our panel right now, so it is time for our panel discussion. Introducing our panelists, we have joining us online, we have Mr. Wayne Crosby, online already with us. We have Mr. Tony Patterson online with us at the present. And ladies and gentlemen, on site we have Mr. Zhou Qingtian, our WDA YCN branch carpentry trainer and also Secretary General of Chinese Management Association, Mr. Zhang Yushan. And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing our wonderful moderator. He is currently the professor from the Department of Labor and Human Resources at Chinese Cultural University. He is our former Minister of Labor, in fact, the first Minister of Labor. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Pan Shiwei, Pan 教授, Pan 部长好.
Good afternoon. I should say good day, mate, in Australia. Okay. But ladies and gentlemen, this session is about a panel discussion. My name is Shiwei Pan, as just introduced, and I'm coming from Chinese Cultural University. And I'm very honored to have such a great opportunity to host the discussion. Our distinguished speakers, we have 4 very great speakers, have all shared their thoughts and also have contributed to enhance our understanding regarding this particular topic. Yet, we still believe that our speakers may still have something to say. Perhaps, my personal opinion, a crossfire, perhaps a crossfire, to enlighten us to further our knowledge to an unexplored frontier on this topic. Therefore, I have prepared a couple of questions and would like to hear from our speakers, wishing we have a fruitful ending for this workshop. Now, my first question, perhaps would like to ask our Australian partners how to bridge the current gap of the mutual recognition of training results between Australia and Chinese Taipei in terms of institutional arrangement. Both of you, Tony Patterson and Wayne Crosby, could you please give us all your opinion? Can you hear us?
Wayne, would you like to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm happy to begin, Tony, and I'm sure you'll follow on appropriately.
Yeah, we call that passing the ball.
Australian rules, it's a handball. Look, the question is a good one, and it's one that I can probably provide some guidance, advice from history, given the work that we did with ASEAN, because it was the question that each of the 10 countries asked, where each country would have a qualifications framework. Some had standards, some didn't have standards. So we were trying to develop our ASEAN standards, and the question was always, do we have to take the new ASEAN standards and get rid of our own current standards? And the answer is no. The process, I think, worth following is to do a comparison or a mapping of what exists in Taiwan, what exists in Australia, and it should be done for each industry sector. Mm-hmm. Now, if we took the example of carpentry that we've just listened to, and I actually learned a lot about carpentry in that, so thank you very much. But that was already happening, where we've got a set of standards in Australia, compare those standards with what is existing in Taiwan. If there are any differences from both sides, so Taiwan might have to adjust slightly its standards to incorporate what's in Australia, but only those standards that are relevant. And Australia could do the same thing. Look, we're always learning from our international cooperation. And I'm sure there are areas that Australia can learn from Taiwan, where we can see your framework, your standards, your competencies, and perhaps they fill in some of the gaps of the Australian standards or competencies. So we would simply add to each other's frameworks what exists in the other country to make them more equivalent. Because what I think the objective of this should be is to have equivalence between qualification, certification, professional standards for industry. And I think that's one way of really bridging the gap, is to simply map what we're doing in each place and fill in those gaps where appropriate. And that's the model we used in ASEAN, where each country said, we've already got our own standards, we've got our own competencies. We said, that's fine. Have a look at these ASEAN standards. If these ASEAN standards can help you have better standards in your country, our advice is to use them, and that's the approach we took.
Okay. Mr. Tony Peterson?
Yeah, look, I would agree with what Wayne has just said, but also to take a phrase that he mentioned, quite often there's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's just a matter of changing some of the spokes to customize it, to make it look and perform the way that you want. I think also it's having the understanding of what is the outcome and what the expectation is. We're talking about vocational education, so it's all competency-based, which means what can a person do or what can't they do? Because with a competency-based framework, it's either they can 100% do the task or they can't. You can't be 50% competent in a task, it's 100% competent. So I think it's about understanding what is the outcome, what is the competency, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve. Now, there is an argument sometimes in Australia, we over-assess. And sometimes I know that a lot of my colleagues are saying that sometimes our framework may be too rigid. And as Wayne said, this is something that we can always learn from each other. But when it comes back to competency-based and you're trying to actually increase our skilled workforce, this is where I think the industry perspective is very important. So to have key industry partners on both sides of Taiwan and Australia that are trying to actually achieve the same outcome is really important, because once you know what the outcome is, you can develop a framework of skills, you can actually develop what needs to be done from a theoretical perspective, and then what needs to be done from a workplace perspective. So for example, in early childcare, a lot of people think that childcare is just about minding children. But in actual fact, a child from 0 to 5 is the formative stages of when they're developing a personality, when they're actually developing thought, when they're developing cognitive abilities. So when we're looking at developing childcare programs, a lot of our students are actually doing theories. They're actually learning the theorist. They're learning about behavioural theory, scientific theory. It's not just about learning how to look after children. So it's understanding again what the end goal is, and then as Wayne said, learning from each other and meeting in the middle.
Okay. Professor Zhang Yusan would like to add some comments? Zhang Yusan, Zhang Jiao, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm privileged and honored today to attend this very illuminating event. And the four keynote speakers earlier, I think, shed lights on this very dynamic and interesting issues. So I couldn't help, because of the lectures beforehand, I couldn't help wonder, because Roy from the Zhonghua Research Institute said this is a new world, the low-touch economy, a new skill set are needed. So I was wondering how you cope with the hospitality, tourism, all these matured industry. How do you cope with the change? So you see, the cruise liner is no longer massive. The cheap jet line has bankrupt. So well, how do we update, adjust the current situation to face the future? Also, in terms of RPL, because of the supply chain has changed significantly. Automation as well as new technology facilitate us. At the same time, the labor mobility has been restricted because of the pandemic. So what are the new skills? What kind of skills are relevant? What kind of previous learning is still effective? What knowledge that you recognize them? So those were question marks for me. So I was very eager and curious about how do you cope, especially hospitality, tourism, those who touch, human touch industry, and heavily hammered, impacted by this pandemic. So how do you face the change? How do you forecast the future, etc.? I think those were the questions. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Zhou, like to comment? Or you will ask them to get the answer? I mean, Professor Zhang?
There's no answer to my question, but
Okay.
your response will be very good if there's
Okay.
some kind of
Okay.
response.
Okay.
Thank you.
周杰 ，yeah， 要不要讲？有没有意见 ？Okay, okay. Wayne Crosby, yeah, please.
Look, thanks for that. I always like answering easy questions, not difficult questions like the ones that you just posed there. But certainly I can make some comment. The tourism and hospitality industry is not unique, but it is particularly a people-based industry. So I listen to the low-touch economy and that sort of theory, and it's true. And you will see in certain countries, in certain jobs, that those jobs can be undertaken sometimes by machines, sometimes by robots. But in the true sense of hospitality, there is nothing like the people interaction. That's really what defines the experience. So combining that with a couple of other questions that you made, how do we cope? How do we forecast the future? There is no doubt that society is going to be desperate for more travel, more hospitality experiences when they are able to have them. And the difficulty and the challenge that we face at the moment is trying to equip industry with the ability to cope with whatever that new environment is. The great thing for all of us in today's workshop is that we're in the industry of developing people. So what we've already done in our organisation for our industry is research with industry what their needs are going to be in the future, develop training programs, whether they don't need to be formal courses, they can be short courses, they can be micro-credentials to add on to existing skills and knowledge and capability that people have. So it's Tony's phrase before, don't reinvent the wheel. The fundamentals are there. Whether you're checking somebody in person or using a computer system or a robot to do it, it's fundamentally the same. If it's done by a very pleasant, well-mannered, hospitality-focused person, you're probably going to get a better experience than with a robot. Because the difference is people can be trained to think outside the square, to think laterally, to solve problems, to be responsive to customer requirements. Sometimes machines are not able to do that. So I think we're still well placed. We just simply need to work with industry to identify exactly what they need and work with them to provide the solution. So we're pretty positive still about the tourism and hospitality industry going forward.
And look, if I could add on to there, and I mentioned that I'm from tourism and hospitality background, both professionally and also educationally. And I remember around about 6 years ago and being involved with a university hotel school and talking to some of the directors of IHG, a large organisation, and asking them what the next trends were in employment and where they saw the future skills. And I remember them saying back then, we need to have a social media listener. And I said, that's great. What will they be doing? And they said, we don't know. We just know that we need one. And I think that's a part of, you know, keeping ahead of the trends. But also, at the end of the day, we are social beings. We do like to travel. I think we will bounce back to adjust in whatever this new normal life is. But if I could also then reflect on what we specialize in, and the world is experiencing some megatrends at the moment, and that is it's aging at a rapid population. And then in some regions, it's also growing at a rapid population. So when we look at the sectors of aged care or elderly care, childcare, these are, I won't say service-based industries, but they're actually care-based industries where we do need people. We can't have robots following dementia patients around for trips and falls, but at the end of the day, it's that human touch and it's that respect and it's that understanding for our elderly, plus that human touch and that understanding for our children that I don't think will actually ever be replaced by robots. Some certain sectors and certain sections may be, but I think those type of traditional industries will still be there. I think the other thing, and we're experiencing in Australia, we're an island, similar to Taiwan, and I think when you go through a pandemic or you go through a worldwide changing, there's a level of protectionism. So Australia closed our borders and to a certain extent, our government did an incredible job of protecting our citizens. But now we're also suffering from skill shortages as well.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding how to best make policy, but best protect our citizens, but at the same time, let other people in where we have a skill shortage to be able to assist our economy and assist our industries.
Okay. I think it is important, you know, when we talk about the expansion of the labor market and to propose this kind of mutual recognition of training results is basically to help the workers, labor, and that they are able to work not only in their own country, but also to the region, to the other countries. So there probably, I myself think, would there be a cultural awareness issue that should be taken into account in the what is called a competency-based training? I don't know. We know perhaps you guys could have some comments on this. Yeah. Okay. Crosby, Wen, please.
Once again, drawing from experience in the ASEAN region.
Excuse me?
10 different countries, 10 different cultures.
Yeah, for example, when we talk about the child caregivers, for example, that in Australia, and I mean the family or the parents, when we're looking for a caregiver, could not be different, I mean, prospectively, I mean, from the Taiwanese employer or the parents, when we look for caregivers. The Taiwanese people, you know, would very much, you know, they like to very critical about how the performance of these caregivers. And I don't know whether there's a difference between Australia and Taiwan and whether this is a part of a competency establishment.
Look, I think the first thing is, and you mentioned caregivers.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a major difference in what a caregiver, perhaps in Taiwan, is in comparison to an early childhood educator in Australia. So when we're dealing from 0 to 5, which is the early years, yes, there's that element of care, but it's more about the education and the development of children at that age.
Yeah.
About their social skills, about their interactions as well. And I always find it interesting that when we're looking at trainers in early childcare, they're possibly quite different to skill-based trainers, carpentry, for example, because the way that they've been educated is that they've been educated as an educator. They're not somebody that actually has come from industry and then have all of a sudden have said, no, I'd like to be a trainer. So their whole mindset and their philosophy is a little bit different. But to address the question about the parents, definitely, your two most valuable assets are your children and your grandparents.
Yeah.
And people
right.
can be very protective about that.
Yeah.
But it's about being able to have a trained workforce that, yes, can care for them, but can also add that value. So, for example, a nurse. A nurse is a very, very highly trained and very, very highly qualified
Right.
in clinical care.
Yeah.
But when it comes to issues like dementia,
Yeah.
when it comes to issues like socialization
Mm-hmm.
or dealing in other areas of an elderly person who may be fit and healthy and has their cognitive function, but they just need that little bit of support. This is where nurses have great skills in certain areas,
Yeah.
but they perhaps have gaps in others.
Okay. Great. I would like to turn the topic to the carpenters. Okay. Maybe 周新田，周先，你可不可以提供一些看法，就是有关于在这个
So perhaps, Mr. Zhou, you can provide us with some of your opinions on what you think about these carpentry training programs, what you think need to be further taken into consideration. I think in terms of carpentry, based on my experience for, teaching for 30, 40 years, in the past few years, a lot of the young people that I have coached or taught have gradually moved into carpentry. It could be because of a family business. For example, his father could have been a carpenter, so he would like his son to become a carpenter as well. So there's more and more of this going on right now. And a lot of the students that I teach right now are young people. So there are more and more young people coming into this line of work, in this industry. And so I believe that this training program is very successful and we should further promote it, because the more we promote it, more young people will be willing to come into this industry, because it's very, for anyone who would like to enter a mentorship or internship in carpentry, you need to first complete this program. And going through this program, you would be able to acquire the skills that you need to immediately perform the jobs that you are required to do once you go into work, the labor force. And the society really needs more workers like us. It may be labor intensive work, but if you can do it well, you can still make a really good career out of it. So we really hope that I really do believe that if we follow this program and the standards we have right now, we can really successfully train a lot of carpenters.
labor supply and demand issue? Because when we train people and people need to find jobs, then it's a problem. Across different countries, perhaps you have to concern about the labor market situation. I remember, when I was able to visit Burkina Faso in Western Africa, the current government, we have a training program facilitated to help the Burkina Faso people establish a training center, skill training center in Burkina Faso. And remember, I visited there, 200 students, actually that graduate from the skill training. And they asked for, talk to me that they were unable to find appropriate jobs because, the economy, the labor market there. So, perhaps when we talk about this mutual recognition of what you call the training results, we probably have to, have in mind that whether the certain kind of jobs or skills could be able to find good jobs in that particular country. I don't know whether Professor Zhang or Wayne Crosby or Tony Preston would like to comment on this.
Can I make a quick response, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get this right. I'm all for tourism and hospitality, 100%. But I'm only curious about the technology and the overall environment impact. The very fact that we are hosting this kind of hybrid conferences today is a change in the conference industry. It's a norm now. People do this kind of conference all the time. So maybe digital skills and technology equipments should be embedded to the competency training program as well. How to handle a media conference, how to book online through a digital device and system. So then respond to our former minister's question that how do we, what kind of jobs and the labor market should align?
Yeah.
I think two tiers. First of all, you need to find local markets. So you do the training for the local. If we can have certain kind of qualification recognition across an agreement, trade agreement, for instance, service trade, that we can, well, on the one hand, ask the importing firm, the country, for instance, the migrant laborers, to do their skills there, training skill there, and get certificates. And for our exporting, for instance, working holiday people to Australia, for instance, to do the departure training so that they can have sufficient security and licensing, insurance, things ready to get to do the more valuable work there. So I think we should do this from the end to the starting point. That is, we need to know where the market is and design the relevant course and seek mutual recognition, etc. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments from Mr. Crosby or Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, happy to make some comments. Look, I couldn't agree more, and that was the major benefit, using examples again from ASEAN, of what they wanted to achieve. They wanted to have sufficient skilled labour to be able to support the needs and development of industry, and they were able to get that skilled labour from any country within the region as long as the potential employee had the skills and knowledge that the job required. The way that was, the evidence that was necessary to be provided was an ASEAN recognised qualification. So it is a great way of supporting the labour force in a particular country where there is insufficient supply of that skilled labour. And Australia is a perfect example of that, where we are importing skilled labour in a number of different industry sectors. And what the process is normally doing an assessment, a skills assessment of the applicant to make sure they have equivalent skills to do the job that an Australian qualified person would have. So it's recognising skills and qualifications from other countries to enable skill shortages to be filled.
Okay.
I'd also add that as a part of any training package or any training, and it was mentioned about digital literacy, I would go back to what we call soft skills through all qualifications. And we're even seeing universities now focus on soft skills that make somebody employable.
Soft skills.
And these are things like how to present yourself in an interview, how to write a resume. In some cases, just how to show up to work on time. It's a lot of these things, I think, that can also be embedded in any training or any qualification.
Okay. 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 Our time is almost up. I don't know whether our speakers would have some other comments to add. Anyone there? No? Okay, I'd like to thank for all the participants and all our speakers. I don't know when and Tony would like to say something to all the participants here.
Oh, look, just a thank you for inviting us along. A thank you for allowing us to share some of our experiences with you, allowing us to hear from some of the activities that have been taking place in Taiwan. Look, as I mentioned before, we will always keep learning from each other. So the more that we're able to engage with each other, to share views and opinions and experiences, you know, I think it's such a wonderful thing, and I can only recommend highly that the two countries keep exploring the potential of mutual recognition arrangements, because there is no doubt a mutual recognition arrangement between Australia and Taiwan in specific industry sectors will help us both.
Okay.
It will help us get the skills that we require.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, I'd reiterate those comments, and I suppose from my perspective, I just look forward to the time that we can actually travel either to Taiwan and meet in person, or have delegations come to Australia, because it is a two-way learning experience, and I think the more we communicate, the more we learn, the more we improve.
Okay. Professor Zhang, 还没有？没有了。Yeah.
I think Tony is absolutely correct that although we can exchange ideas over the air, but you can't have the coffee break and dessert we have. So I think you need to come down and physically prove that the physical is better than virtual. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We should be closing. Okay. 谢谢大家。交给主持人。
Thank you to 您是主持人. Thank you to our minister. Minister, we take a group photo right here.
Okay.
Please, let's take off our face mask. 报告部长，报告秘书长，还有我们周先生，我们暂时拿到口罩，就画面上的截图。
So we will be now taking a group photo online.
For our group photo? Okay, there we have Mr. Zhou. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what do we do now? Our applause. 谢谢部长. Thank you very much. Wonderful panel, wonderful sharing. Thank you so much. Yes, you should come to Taiwan and have our coffee and tea. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our post-pandemic talent and skills mobility workshop. Thank you to our moderator. Thank you to our Deputy Director General. Thank you. And of course, thank you to our panelists online. As our moderator, our minister would say, have a good one, mate. Thank you very much. 好，非常感谢我们现场的长官、贵宾来到我们。
We would like to thank all of our distinguished guests for participating in our workshop today.
Workforce Development Agency from the Ministry of Labor. 然后我们的执行单位是社团法人中华民国科学管理学会。感谢各位您的莅临，谢谢。各位，我们热烈掌声，谢谢我们部长，谢谢我们潘部长，谢谢部长。我们劳动部第一任部长潘部长。